Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Stephen Jarvis and Friends podcast. We're here on YouTube and Facebook, but I'm not alone. We got Anthony here, and we're going to be talking about our top 5 horror films. Should be pretty interesting to hear what Anthony, aka Tony, has to say and what I have to say. Let's get into it. So,
Good
Tony,
deal.
how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Just hanging out here on Hollywood Boulevard.
How's that weather over there?
It's hot. It's very warm. It's very warm. And now my cat wants to start talking. He didn't say a word all day.
All right. So I'll let you start off, man. Number 5.
Wow, number 5. You know what? It was so hard to narrow these down because you're talking, my gosh, you're going back all the way to the Edison Frankenstein film, all the way to, stuff that comes out this weekend. But I kind of tried to look at movies that were influential and successful and very, quality-wise. Like there's some really cool movies that I enjoy, like Theater of Blood or A House That Dripped Blood. Some of those older movies from the 70s and all that. They were kind of B movies. So I'm kind of leaning towards more. I don't want to say blockbuster because some of them weren't entirely blockbusters, but they were very interesting. If I had to give a movie that really is a great movie on every level, script, directing, everything, it would be The Howling from 1981.
Yep.
Excellent werewolf movie. One of the best ever made. I think it surpasses American Werewolf in London on many levels. Not that American Werewolf in London is a bad film. It's John Sayles took a potboiler pulp novel. It was a good novel. It wasn't stellar, and it went into development, and they did a few script revisions or whatever, and then I guess it wasn't working out, and then it went to John Sayles. Sayles did an unbelievable job with that screenplay. Director Joe Dante and a great cast. Patrick McNee, Dee Wallace, just great. Everybody in that movie was great. And what it really makes it great is that The Howling didn't just come out of the box and just launch a lot of mayhem. It was a mystery. We didn't even know that it was a colony of werewolves toward the end. You really are playing. You really don't know what's going on. You think it's you think that it's the Eddie Quist. Did he die? Did he come back? What's going on? And then you find out that it's this psychotherapy colony for werewolves trying to cure their like cancer. Although most of them don't want to be cured. And it's a great movie, stellar.
Oof.
So that's my number 5.
Howling. How can I? Well, this one's a harbinger back to the past. I'm gonna have to go with Night of the Living Dead. I'm a big George A. Romero fan. And let's be honest, it started our love for zombies. Granted, they weren't called zombies in the film, they were called ghouls. But I mean, without night, you would never have dawn, you would never have day, and just 3 of the greatest zombie movies I think were ever made. They didn't have to run. They just walked like they were normal people.
And it was a very claustrophobic, and he really built the suspense through that. And the payoff when the zombies attack really grabs you. It's very shocking. It's very surprising. And in 1968, nobody expected what was happening in that film. It was coming up, I should say. It was a shocker.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely.
And shot on a low budget, in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just such a great film. And plus, that movie, in my opinion, kind of helped us with some of the other movies that would come out of that time. I kind of look at Assault on Precinct 13 as kind of being a resemblance of it, that the street gang is more like the zombies. They're calculating their moves and just
that was like a hybrid of Night of the Living Dead and Rio Bravo.
Yep.
So it had a lot of cool influences. That was another great movie.
Yep. Number 4 to you.
Number 4. To think about that for a while, I would have to say Saw, and sometimes doesn't get the respect it deserves. Um, I think because some of the entries in the franchise were not that great, although Saw 3 was an excellent film. But the very first Saw, I remember the trailers for it and the TV previews, and it was a movie you really had to go see. And I remember catching it in a theater in Orange County, and really took me aback. I mean, it was a very, very well written, well paced, very suspenseful. Again, another movie that keeps you guessing. You don't necessarily know where it's going, and the shock ending comes out of the blue. And it was an innovative villain. It was a multifaceted villain, although they fleshed the character out in later films. They kept really interesting focus on the two protagonists that were chained in that basement. So it wasn't a throwaway. They weren't throwaway victims and throwaway killings.
Yeah.
And there was this attempt to try to make the passive character a character that was almost a not an avenging angel, but he wasn't so much about vengeance. He was more about rebirth and regeneration and recapturing these elements that were dragging people down psychologically. Most of them weren't cured; they ended up dying. But it was a really surprisingly well done movie. At a time, like a lot of horror movies, you had a few good ones here and there, but a lot of the stuff was not really well thought out. Towards that home entertainment, and I think Saw was a big. Saw and Scream were a big part of horror's resurgence back in the early 2000s.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being born in 1993, we didn't have the original Halloweens or the original Friday the 13th. So when Scream came out later in that decade, I mean, and then of course you had the best opening in a horror movie where it's like Drew Barrymore is a big time actor, and yet she does the job to get killed right away.
Yeah, that's a throwback to some older cameos that were, I think, in Europe back in the day when they would do the star to come in an opening or a play on Psycho where you bring in a character who's recognizable and then out of the movie. So but the Scream was I saw Scream in the theater. That was a really good movie. The original first movie was good.
With Saw, I only seen the first one, and that was enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the ultra gore type person. Like, there's people that are telling me to go see Terrifier 1 and 2, and it's like, it ain't for me.
I haven't seen it. I've seen some pretty wild stuff. If you really want to see the really crazy over the top stuff, that would be the stuff from the 70s was far worse than anything made today, and the 80s. The stuff today doesn't touch it. I mean, I'm not talking about the special effects. I'm talking about the tone and the mean-spiritedness of some of those old movies.
Yeah.
That's my number 4.
Well, your number 4 is Saw. My number 4, believe it or not, is going to have to be A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Ooh, it's a great film. Great.
And there's probably going to be people that watch this back and go like, number 4? And the reason why, it was the 80s. It was something that was new, just like what my later one for number 2 would be. But you also have to understand, it followed a formula, but it also rewrote that formula that Halloween created in 1978. But they did it around people dying in their sleep, dying in their dreams with Nightmare on Elm Street. And it was a great formula that they created. I mean, Wes Craven has to go down as one of the most underrated directors of all time. He created Last House on the Left. He created The Hills Have Eyes, Nightmare on Elm Street, And he even would later do the Scream movies, created them. And it's just like, how many directors do you know have? Well, I mean, you can't really consider Last House on the Left a really a big home run. Wes Craven didn't really like making that movie.
No, that made a ton of money though.
It did, and it was a learning experience for both him and Sean Cunningham, which Sean Cunningham would later go on to Friday the 13th fame. But yeah, my number 4 has got to be Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street. Some people call it a slasher movie. That is not a slasher movie.
No.
That's a monster movie. That is a monster movie. It is a mixed monster movie / psychological thriller. And at the time that movie came out in '84, and the slasher movie cycle was deader than dead, except for Friday the 13th. Right? They wanted to end that series, and they couldn't end it because it kept making money. And But it was following a time when you had a lot of slasher movies that made a lot of money, and then a lot of them that underperformed, and too many of them and burned everybody out.
Then you had the rip-offs.
So, yeah. You had horror and night was, horror started out really strong in the early '80s and kind of started fizzling, but it had a few movies that would pick it up, and the Nightmare on Elm Street definitely was a home run. That was a tremendous little low budget film that kind of tapped into a mix of the people who still wanted to see a slasher movie, but also people who didn't like slasher movies and wanted to see something a little bit more original, and that's really what carried that film. I think it was a very original, fantastic villain, fantastic performance by Robert Englund. So that really
definitely.
that one. That was a classic.
And of course, you had Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy. And you had also Johnny Depp in that movie, which role. His death is one of the best. To be stuck in your own head like that.
That was good. What was great about it was a horror movie. It wasn't a horror comedy. Part 2, Part 3. Well, Part 2 kind of just was incoherent. Part 3 kind of really veered into horror comedy. Part 4 actually was pretty good, but then the rest of the movies, they just seemed more like a American Werewolf in London type. Mix of horror and. But
number 3 to you.
Unmotivated one-liners, and that gets old. Number 3. Oh boy, Reanimator. Reanimator blew everyone's mind when they saw it.
Definitely.
And that was a movie that, what stunned me about it was that movie was released unrated. So, first time I ever rated was an advertisement with Zombie, Fulci Zombie, 1980. Where no one under 17 admitted, period, this movie's shocking. And Reanimator was also released unrated. It was an Empire Pictures movie. And when you watch it, not a lot of money went into the budget on that movie. But what was stunning was the critics loved it. I mean, it got great reviews. I mean, one of my favorites was, I think it was TV Guide gave it 3 stars and said, it's not for everybody, but you know who you are. But it was a funny movie in the right spots. The humor was where it belonged. It was frightening in spots where it needed to be frightening, and it was very, very original. I think it gets mischaracterized as a zombie film. I don't consider it a zombie. More like a science fiction horror, where scientist is able to bring back the dead, and it's bizarre because they go berserk when they wake up because they're going through childbirth as an adult, so the mind isn't developed, and they snap, and then later on he's able to bring back character who has his mental faculties, even though his head's been removed. And that was a great, cool, thinking living dead creature that really spun the third act of that movie. And Reanimator it had everything. It had very great directing by Stuart Gordon. It had fantastic
Yep.
music for a soundtrack. Which I remember them selling that in Fangoria. They used to have Reanimator, Dawn of the Dead, Andy Warhol, Frankenstein, and Dracula all on vinyl, and I can imagine what those old original pressings go for. But Reanimator, very strangely, um, did not really spawn as many rip.
Yeah.
I
I
think it's
mean,
because horror was dying by
yeah.
1985.
Yeah.
Too many sequels, uh, too many horror comedies.
Hmm.
And by about 87, I mean, you still had some good movies, but by 87, horror kind of went down the tubes for a while. And it was also, the VHS boom, and the old horror hitting VHS and the drive-ins dying out. But
Yep.
that was a movie that did well in theaters and as best it could with its distribution. But it was a bigger hit on VHS with the Vestron Lightning Video label, and launched. No, I would say Ghoulies was the movie that really launched Empire, because that was their biggest hit. But Death put Empire on the map and really provided a lot of creative blood into the
Yep.
genre that the slasher cycle really just took out of horror movies. Every horror movie was becoming the same thing, and Reanimator struck with something very original, and that's probably its saving grace.
And of course, great acting by Barbara Compton. Great
Oh yeah.
actress.
She was great
I
in From Beyond, the follow up.
I I felt so bad for her character in that first one though. The
Yeah,
to be, to be strapped there and then have the guy with the head doing what he was doing to her. It's just like, good lord.
yeah, that's
But at the
something.
time, that was taboo. It never had been done before.
No, nobody thought of anything that over the top. I mean, that just was way over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, whoa, yeah, they really, yeah, that was out there.
Mine.
Why the movie couldn't get an R rating? It's like, so that's the whole reason you go unrated, because at the time there was no NC-17. They would give
Yeah.
you the X, and you
Yeah.
couldn't get distribution with an X.
Yeah.
So they
I
didn't.
mean, you said it best. By the time that 85 happens, the whole slasher genre just is nosediving, horror diving. I mean, you could even look at how many movies that were deemed horror slasher back in that time that were coming out. Like you had My Bloody Valentine coming out of Canada. You had all these other imitations of Halloween and Friday the
Hmm.
13th, and they're trying to raise that blood count. They're trying to get that body count up there, and people just, it got tiring. It became like a niche in a way, and
It was the same thing over and over
yep,
again.
yep,
Some of the movies were actually good. Like one of the myths is that there were no really good slasher movies. My Bloody Valentine is excellent. Didn't do
yeah.
well at the box office. Excellent film. The Prowler didn't do well at the box office. Excellent film. Graduation Day was a huge box office
The
hit.
the
Uh,
Burning.
the Burning, excellent film.
I mean, we
What
could
was the other
go
one? Oh,
we could go
When
on
the
and
Strings
on
Are Cut.
about all the old movies that were
Mhm.
just totally went under the radar, but yet got cult classic. I mean, you had Sleepaway Camp. You had that
Yeah,
in
I
there
remember
with
that.
the
That was
Who
the
Done It,
film.
and it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how some of those movies were made back then
Yeah.
that now today would probably be celebrated. Like Sleepaway Camp. Whoever thought of a, to use today's time, a transgender type killer or a
Yeah,
killer
see,
that was,
I remember that the TV act. The issue with it was that that movie came out, and other movies came out as the drive-ins were dying,
yep, yep,
and as the independently owned theaters were dying. Like when I grew up in Philadelphia, you had a lot of drive-in movies in the suburbs, in the Jersey suburbs. You had many independent single theaters that had been around for years that had now fallen into decay. I mean, you'll hear the term grindhouse. Or I wouldn't call these theaters grindhouses. I call them second-run theaters.
yeah,
Um,
hmm,
I mean, the stuff in Times Square, that was a grindhouse. You know, if you went to the
Yeah.
Duke and Duchess Theater in Philly, that was a grindhouse. Um, but some of the theaters like the Tyson or the, the Tyson and the Devon and the Mayfair, these were second run theaters where they would play a movie 6 or 7 months after it came out, and they would pick
Yep.
up a few horror movies here and there. They also played mainstream stuff. And again, you only had
Yeah.
one screen. The drive-ins were done; they were gone. So a movie
Yep.
like Sleepaway Camp didn't get enough bookings. I mean, it could do okay. I mean, they made sequels, so it made money. They wouldn't sequelize something that wasn't making money, but it was probably something that made a few bucks with VHS sales for the video
Yep.
store. Um, I know Bronson's Death Wish 4 was a huge seller. That did about
Oh,
100,000 copies.
definitely.
Yeah, but I don't know what Sleepaway Camp certainly didn't do that figure.
Yeah.
But they just didn't have. There was no place to distribute. Not saying no, but it was very limited
Well,
places
definitely.
to distribute
And
them.
plus, like you were saying with the drive-ins dying off, um, another thing was when they were labeled as grindhouse, a lot of people were like, well, what is a grindhouse film, and all that. And it was kind of looked
Oh,
at kind of taboo type of a
yeah.
movie. But they
The
weren't.
term,
They were great films.
well, the term grindhouse. That kind of emerged out of the underground.
Yeah.
You never really heard that word mentioned in any mainstream publication.
No.
You would read about it in newsletters back during the days when you had the 1980s was the glory days of Xerox fanzines, and these things were nuts. I mean, you
Yeah.
had some really insane. I mean, forget about the internet, man. I mean, when you had these crazy and very passionate uh, movie fans who would put out these newsletters to small subscriber but passionate subscriber base.
Yep.
And they had horror movies, they had kung fu movie fanzines, they had spaghetti western fanzines, you had music, you had wrestling ones, you had all that, and that's really where I first heard the term grindhouse, and the first time I ever heard people talk about their experiences in the theater. And what I mean by experiences in the theater, today if you went into a theater and you sat down and you watched the movie, maybe some jerk pulls out a cell phone, okay, whatever. I mean, I've been in theaters where fights have broken out. I've been in theaters where you almost had a riot, where you almost
Yeah.
30 people getting ready to brawl, where people threw stuff at the screen, where the usher punched people because they were getting rowdy, where people in the movie's out of focus, they're yelling and screaming, the projectionist is yelling at them, and the projectionist comes down, and projectionist is getting ready, and then you're just getting out of the theater, because
Yep.
you don't know, because you don't want to get caught. That's why I always sit in the back of the theater. I always sit in the last row. I don't want
Yep.
anybody. Definitely don't want to be in the middle. And
Yep.
I certainly don't want to be at the front. If I'm in the middle and something happens and I'm in the middle of all this, the front row. Now, how are you going to get out? You got to go up the aisle through all these lunatics when something goes sideways. So I sat at the end. I do that to this day. I sit in the last row, and nothing's going to happen today. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to have
Yeah.
to bolt out of the theater for your safety. But I saw a guy picked up and thrown, like body slammed once. I mean, yeah, that was in North Jersey. Yeah, yeah. So those theaters, those theaters were nuts, and the even when they weren't crazy, remember people were in the theater impaired, and they yell at the screen. They didn't like a movie. They yell at it. If somebody did something stupid, they say it was stupid. Toss popcorn, and they throw it,
Yeah.
and the popcorn couldn't reach the screen. It would hit somebody in the back of the head, and then that guy would get mad, and they'd start yelling at each other. So that is a loss. Because sometimes I go to the New Beverly Theater, and they'll have like Grindhouse night, which is no, that's not a Grindhouse theater; it's a revival house.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they would say, they would read the rules, and one of the rules is no talking during the movie. And I used to laugh because if you went to a second-run theater or a rundown theater, my God, the audience never shut up. I mean, that was the whole fun of the movie. Some of some idiocy or some of the craziness they would scream at the screen. And don't order from it. Oh my God, don't order from the concession stand. You will regret it. That food, Those hot dogs, man, they've been spinning since 1973, man. I mean, nah, don't bring your own lunch, man.
And we have our first comment from Jordy. He's saying, just popped in to say hi and like the
Hey,
stream. I live in England, so we will catch replay as having dinner, then bed. Well, thank you so much for liking the stream. We love doing this, and I love having Tony on here. His number 3 was Reanimator, which if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. All these movies that we've been talking about are definitely worth a watch. Some of
spend the
today's,
money for the Blu-rays because that's got the commentary track, and they're don't just get yourself streaming of it. Go get the Blu-ray and check out some of the documentaries that these films come packed with and the commentaries because you know what, I buy a lot of movies that I wouldn't pay $20, $25 for them just for the movie.
Definitely.
I like them, but I get them for the commentary track a lot of times, and I'm very rarely disappointed by some of the ones that are put out.
And then my number 3, My Bloody Valentine. I mean, just the way the story structure and the whodunit and thinking that it's Harry Warden throughout the whole film, and then you find out it's one of the kids, was just by far a great Canadian horror film. And I wouldn't just say it's a great Canadian horror film. I think it was one of those horror films that we were talking before that kind of flew under the radar and definitely does not get enough credit. I mean, it was so different from the time of the movies that we were getting, like the numerous Halloweens, the numerous Friday the 13th. This was actually harboring back to Black Christmas, to the whodunits. And then when you finally find out who did it, you're kind of like, wow, would have never guessed it was that person.
You couldn't make a cooler looking villain if you spent 10 years trying to think of it. You know, they don't call him the miner in the movie, but that coal mining outfit is like, man, that's super cool. Second greatest Canadian horror movie after Black Christmas. I remember, as another movie, I remember the TV ads for it. I remember the posters. I like the poster so much I bought one.
I gotta get me one of them, man. That poster looks badass.
That's a mini one though. I should have got I need to get the one sheet. An original. That's a repo.
I gotta fill up my back wall back there. It just got the mask.
Yeah. Gotta go on eBay and get yourself some posters and lobby cards. And my Bloody Valentine, it did $5 million at the box office. It was considered a disappointment. What happened with that was the studio started, because Universal bought Halloween, made a fortune. Paramount, Friday the 13th made a fortune. I can't remember. I think it was Columbia. Columbia bought Terror Train and lost money. And I don't think My Bloody Valentine, $5 million is not bad, but it certainly wasn't $40 million.
At that point, it wasn't where the norm was going with how these. And again, sorry to cut you off, but again, it all does start with Texas Chainsaw and Black Christmas, to where they were kind of your drive-in variety. But then when Halloween comes out, you could see dollar signs as soon as Halloween was proved a success, which it didn't start out that way in theaters right away. It took critics to go out and say, hey, go check out this film. It'll scare the crap out of you. And then I think with Hollywood and the studios, they got the dollar signs in their eyes. And they wanted to get out these movies.
Yeah, well, Halloween, wasn't even called Halloween at first. It was
Babysitter Murders.
Yeah, and Irwin Yablin said, no, you know what, let's call this Halloween. I think it was Irwin Yablin.
Yep.
And they said, what we'll do, I don't know if this is true or not, but when the movie was doing very well in theaters in 1978, they kind of pulled it or didn't really expand it. I don't know if this is accurate. It could be people spinning fairy tales. With the idea behind it that it would build anticipation for a re-release in 79 and 1980 and become something that you would release every Halloween. it made big money in theaters in '78 and '79,
Yep.
and we're talking $40 million gross at least.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
maybe
And
more.
at
Might have
that
been.
time, that was Halloween was still considered an independent film because it was uh Trancas, wasn't it, that or was it Compass that originally released it?
No,
They were
Universal.
the
That was
Irwin
Universal.
Yablon's company, which Irwin Yablon should be up there with Carpenter and Deborah Hill and all them up there on that Mount Rushmore, because could you imagine a franchise being called the Babysitter Murders and making as much money as what they did? Granted,
Nah, no, nah,
that's
wouldn't
what
work.
happens in the
Would have been.
film, but I don't think it would have worked. Halloween sounded
Nah,
much better.
it would have been Black Christmas, or not Black
Yep.
Christmas. It would have been as successful as Black Christmas. It would have
It
been
would
a
have been like
minor hit.
Slumber Party or uh yeah,
Because Black Christmas, you can't release a horror movie at Christmas. Like,
yep,
I shouldn't say
yep,
that, they did Silent Night, Deadly Night, and it made
yeah,
a lot of money. And when it made money, they pulled it out of theaters because it's too controversial. Christmas and horror, it's hard to market that.
yeah,
And then, how many people are really into the horror movie mindset at Christmas? But Halloween that was a printing press. It was a printing press. The sequel, the third movie was great. So that original trilogy, although the third movie had nothing to do with the other two, but those first
they
three movies were really, really good.
they
And they
had
all made
built
money.
up, and I'll get more into this because I'm sure everyone already out there knows what my number one is, because it's always my number one. But number two to you, Tony.
I go with Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead, is it superior to Night of the Living Dead? No. No. But is it a great movie? Yeah. Yeah, I think it was great because what it did was it basically combined horror and action because
Yep,
it's a shoot 'em up. I mean, they're running around the SWAT teams and the biker gangs and the hunters and all this other guys, they're running around basically trying to take out the zombies, and then they just get overwhelmed. And you
yep,
get a lot of stuff that would be found in an action movie. You also get brilliant satire, but understated satire. It's not
yep,
over the top. Like,
yep,
they shift it from the cabin in the woods to this mall, and
yeah,
where the people living there are absorbed by the consumerism after the world ends. You have everything. It's like, but you're bored because there's nothing. You have nothing, but you have everything, and it
and
works.
plus,
It works.
can we give credit where credit's due? To have, and we'll even go back to Night of the Living Dead with this one, to have a black lead character back then,
Very rare.
very rare. I mean, you had them in the exploitation films, the black exploitation films like Superfly and Shaft and all that, but you got to realize, even though George A. Romero wasn't trying to do something like that, the actors who, when Ben was in the first one and then you had Peter in the second one, great, great characters, but
Yeah.
also it was so out of the norm back then, to where in Night of Living Dead, Ben dies at the end.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And then in the
Totally
original
unacceptable.
ending, Peter was supposed to die in the original ending of Dawn of the Dead.
Yes.
But
Yes. The suicide ending that they wisely
yeah,
changed because it's too downbeat. He was a great character who anchored the film because in this
definitely.
crazy crazy world where you can go insane, he's like your prototypical Rock of Gibraltar. He keeps everybody, he keeps his cool. He doesn't succumb to the insanity that the other characters. All of them slowly descend into
Well,
different
definitely.
of psychological decay, but he maintains it. All at the end where he puts the gun to his head and then he's like, no, no,
Yep.
I'm not doing this. Well,
Yep. And then she
you
was
know.
supposed to put her head up in the blades, but they couldn't kill a pregnant woman. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
that got all scrapped, and then we got the hero ending, which
Yeah, sometimes you write this stuff,
yeah.
He did that. The movie wouldn't have made any money. It just would have got
No,
bad word of mouth.
there would have been
Too down.
people protesting it left and right, which surprisingly they didn't back in that day because, like we said, it was so taboo to have a main character not only who was black, but a strong black character who, like you said, kept everyone calm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
he was the adult in the room during the
yeah,
zombie apocalypse.
yeah.
And
And they're all
well, you
wondering
know,
why these zombies are doing what they're doing. And he goes out and says, when there's no room left in hell, the dead walk the earth.
yeah, yeah,
Underrated line.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but Dawn of the Dead was a shockingly big hit, and a bigger hit
Yep.
than Night of the Living Dead. The only drawback on the movie is the ending, the ambiguous ending. It's kind of a non-ending. It's just the movie.
Yeah.
They fly away. You don't get a conclusion, but you can't have a conclusion really because you can't. Humanity's fallen. It's over.
Yeah. And I mean, them were the apocalyptic movies before we got the apocalyptic movies nowadays.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Dawn of the Dead probably was one of the most influential horror movies ever because
Yep.
it created the entire massive zombie apocalypse
Mm-hmm.
subgenre. But the joke of the whole thing is that it took 30 years. I mean, but Fulci Zombie came out right after that, made a lot of money. And
Yeah.
there were other zombie movies that came out, but they were kind of distinct. Like if you watch The Beyond or City of the Living Dead and some of the other horrible ones,
Yep.
they drifted a bit more towards the supernatural. So they
Yeah.
kind of mashed up Night of the Living Dead with like I Walk with a Zombie. So which is cool, but the zombie genre really didn't. It didn't explode like the slasher genre.
No. It hit its
But then,
zenith and its peak right away. I would.
yeah, and
Well,
then Walking Dead with the comic book, and then the adaptation
yeah.
kind of resurrected it. But but it was on AMC, so you had, they took the concept to a mainstream audience. Probably a lot of them probably never saw Dawn of the Dead, so it was all fresh and original to them. Um, so
Yeah,
in a way,
when they made Shaun of the Dead, I mean,
that was a great one. Yeah.
that was again, they took the zombie and they made it British and then they made it comedy.
Yeah.
And again, out of the norm, so it's like I don't think the zombie genre got as much of a credit, but like you said, it didn't really take off like the slasher, the thriller horror, or anything like that.
No,
I mean, the
very
last
surprising.
one we got was Day, and then we didn't get a George A. Romero film that was anything to do with ghouls or zombies until Land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing with Day of the Dead was he didn't want to do it with an R rating, so he couldn't get a
Yep.
$10 million budget. And again, it's 1985 distribution
Yeah.
tough. I remember. I mean, I remember the movie came out. I remember the TV ads, all that stuff. But it was like one week. It played like at the Mayfair Theater 1 week. It played like at a
Yeah.
drive-in, at the Buck County Drive-in, whatever, for like 1 week. So
Yeah.
they were in and out. They were in and out of theaters, and they were bucking, the trend at the time, which
Yep.
was Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. It was just it was something that didn't translate to the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took it time as time passed, it became fashionable again, so to speak. But in the 80s, mid 80s
Yeah.
and beyond, no, it wasn't going to work.
It
Early
just
80s, it might have.
Yeah. It just became a bunch of sequels later in the 80s of
Everything was a sequel. Everything started
Yep.
becoming a horror comedy, and it turned audiences off. And then, when you do crappy movies, people started just waiting for the VHS.
and now Tony's was his number 2 was Dawn of the Dead. I didn't really like the remake of it.
I thought it was cool.
It was a different thing with the zombies running, but at the same time, it's just I love the original so much. that it was kind of hard. Like they did the same setting in a way, which was a
Mm-hmm.
mall,
Yeah.
but they did it where zombies are now running. And to me, I never thought that was really scary, because to me it's like, well, now you can tell what they are, where in the original series, unless you got really close to them, you couldn't tell they were a zombie. You just thought it was some weirdo out in the
Yeah.
street. And
Yeah.
yet George A. Romero even copied that in The Crazies, the original.
Yeah. Yeah. The Crazy. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That was a cool movie too.
I
Yeah.
love
I
that
never.
movie too.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen. I saw that on Channel 9, New York. Oh boy, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that just kind of popped up on Saturday afternoon TV. Yeah,
Yeah.
that.
And the
Martin was a
sad,
cool.
which one?
Martin, Romero's vampire movie.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
I
he
guess I
did.
never seen that one. I'll have to check that
Very.
one out.
Yeah, they just uncovered the lost 3 hour cut of the film, but it's they don't have the rights to release it.
Yeah.
Uh, one copy, 16 millimeter print surface, and it's in a private collector's hands. So maybe one day we'll get the 3 hour version. But the 2 hour, the hour and a half, 2 hour version is actually really good too.
Well, since your number two was Dawn of the Dead, I'm going to bring us to, and this is a really hard, because like we both said, ranking five is really tough. I mean,
Oh
if
yeah,
we did 10, it would have been easier, but God, my number two, I'm going to have to go Black Christmas. Um,
great
it
film.
was a
I have the
big deal.
DVD in my drawer right here.
It was a big
Who's that?
deal. And it later helped bring one of the biggest slashers in the 70s, that being Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with Black Christmas, it's another one that I would have said that, hey, maybe you could have made 2 or 3 movies afterwards, because it was that good. And it ended
Yeah.
on such a cliffhanger ending. And I'll say it the same thing with My Bloody Valentine. You could have made another one back then. You didn't have to wait until the remake or anything like that. You could have made another My Bloody Valentine. You could have made another Black Christmas, because they were that good. But
Yeah, they only problem they're disappointed at the box office. But Black
yeah,
Christmas, they didn't know how to distribute it. They didn't even
yep,
call it Black Christmas in the United States. It was was it Silent Night, Evil Night,
yep,
which was I think it was Silent Night, Evil Night. Um, they did not know how to market it,
no.
and it died a quick death, and it was a shame because that is a great horror movie.
And you
Absolutely great.
never really see the killer at all.
No, and that's what makes it
Yep.
really innovative. I mean, they borrowed from the urban legend, the babysitter with
The
the killer
babysitter, yep,
on the
and the
house.
man upstairs.
And it was a very 1970s ending, one you wouldn't get today.
Yep.
70s, as most people who like the 70s cinema will tell you, downbeat films with downbeat, depressing endings,
Yep.
mostly because of the mindset, post-Vietnam, post-Watergate, nihilistic
Yeah,
outlook,
exactly.
or
I
nihilistic,
mean,
however you
the
pronounce it.
the the bad thing about My Black Christmas, and you said it, you hit it right on the head. They just didn't know how to really market it, and plus, it had the word Christmas in there. And Christmas back in the day was looked at as jolly, wholesome. You wake up, you open your presents, and now all of a sudden they're making it about a killer.
Yeah, it's just, I don't want, like, I say to myself, Christmas is just not a good time for horror
Yep.
movies, but Silent Night, Deadly Night, like I said, was making money and
Yep. Especially the
they sold
first
it.
one. The second one was more horror comedy. They kind of
Yeah.
were. I think they were the first one to do the horror comedy route. I could be wrong on that. Maybe it was Evil Dead 2. Who knows? But again, they had to try something different after the first one. Which the first, like always said, the first Silent Night, Deadly Night, great film on its own. I don't know
Oh,
if
yeah.
they would have had to make the sequel, but they did. Just like everything was a sequel of a sequel of a sequel. And
It didn't do
Black
well in
Christmas,
theaters. did well on VHS, so that was just they were going to get a lot of direct-to-video sequels.
Yep. So number two for me is Black Christmas, and Billy is an underrated killer. Um, didn't get his due, like we were saying, and it's really sad because even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when it first came out, which was a drive-in horror movie, didn't really
Hmm.
get its credit until much later on, which is sad.
Yeah, it was trashed by a lot of critics when it came out, just on
Yeah,
the name of the title. It took a long time before people started to appreciate it, but I think the
yeah,
reason it took a long time was because the 14, 15, and 17-year-olds who sat in the drive-in and watched it when they got to be 37 and they started writing and publishing
yeah,
essays and all that. So I'm saying, no, no, this is a good movie. So I
yeah,
think that's one of the reasons why it takes a while because your original audience has to grow up and start reviewing it, whereas someone 45 years old, 1973, 74, watching that movie was probably appalled. I mean, they weren't going to give that a good review.
yeah,
Um, they probably, a lot of them, like Dawn of the Dead. Roger Ebert walked out 15 minutes into the movie when they, during the shootout with the SWAT team
yeah,
in the housing project with all the bloody you know squibs, the shootings and all that.
yeah.
And he said, "No, this is not for me. I'm out of here." Yeah. So sometimes it takes a while. I remember an old films in review or film comment. I can't remember. It was the early '70s issue I came across, and they gave a wild bunch of bad reviews. They gave On Her Majesty's Secret Service a bad review. They gave Five Fingers of Death a bad review, and all those movies are now considered really stand-ups in
Um,
the genre.
now that you say the Five Fingers of Death, I mean, heck, now you got me wanting to make a kung fu movie reviews. Um, I
So
don't know
that's a
which
lot.
one is your most favorite one, and
Kung Fu?
maybe I can have you on for when we do that one. I definitely got to do one for kung fu because I love those movies, especially the Bruce Lee, the Chuck Norris, the Jackie
Yeah.
Chan. Uh,
Yeah. In fact, I just got Force of One from Amazon. I'm gonna probably watch it this weekend. So yeah, I've actually been starting to add to my Chuck Norris collection because now they're on Kino Lorber video on
yeah.
Blu-ray. But yeah, there was some good, there was some interesting stuff.
Did you
There
ever
comes,
watch um the 36 Chamber of Shaolin?
oh yeah,
Oh, I
oh
love
yeah.
them
I
movies.
saw it. I saw it under the title "The Master Killer" when that's what it
Yep.
was. That was what it was aired on TV in the
Hmm.
Black Belt Theater syndicated package. Boy, and then there was the Return of the Master Killer. But there was a store in Hell's Kitchen, New York, called the 36 Chamber, and I think it sold kung fu stuff. But there was a theater on 41st and 8th Avenue, just big sign, kung fu, and I used to go there in the '90s, early '90s, during the death, no, not late '90s, early '90s, like '92, '93, when Times Square was on its last leg, actually was on fumes. And when you went into the theater, not theater, video store, none of these movies were legally available.
Really?
And no, these were all bootlegs.
Wow.
And I still have them because I could never get rid of them. I actually saw these same bootlegs in Philadelphia's Chinatown around the same time. And when you watch these movies, it was like watching a 3D movie without the glasses. They were like fourth generation boots. They had to be from the 16 millimeter prints or the 35 prints because they were R rated. They weren't TV prints. I mean, like I had, oh boy, what was the Western? Oh, Hard Way to Die, which is a whack movie. Oh gosh, what was the other one with Carl Scott? That was another crazy one. Oh god, I can't remember the name of the second Carl Scott movie, but that was really cool. But yeah, it was like this weirdo store just on 41st and 8th that somehow survived selling fourth and fifth generation VHS dupes of kung fu movies for $20. Three for 20, I think it was in those
Wow.
days. So yeah, I bought a few of those. I remember once I went to a job interview and I thought I got it, and I went there and I celebrated by buying 3 kung fu movies, and I didn't get the job, so I had no money coming no extra money coming in. I was shorted now the $20 I spent on the movies. But hey, I wasn't working, so I needed something to do. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So now getting back to what we were talking about, my second one was Black Christmas. Number one to you, Tony.
Going way back, The Wolfman, 1942.
Oh, there we go.
Can't remember. Was it 41 or 42? Yeah, Universal classic. Most people, when you talk about the Universal movies and they say what's the best one, most people are going to say Bride of Frankenstein. Some people are going to say Frankenstein. You're going to have a
Some
few
people
people
will
say
even
that.
say Dracula.
Yeah. Although Dracula gets a lot of criticism because it's not really a movie, it's not a film. It's a
Yeah.
stage play that's been filmed. It's it's
Yeah.
almost like you captured a theatrical production, but that's another discussion. Um, the
Yep.
Wolfman, the original script, the original ending, you never saw the Wolfman, and it was hinted at the end that Larry Talbot was insane. He did not become a werewolf, and I think
Yeah.
when Siodmak handed the script to the heads at Universal, like Carl Laemmle, I'm sorry if I mispronounce these names sometimes. Um, they read it and they're like, "What are you doing, man? Rewrite this and put a werewolf in this." So he went and rewrote it and he gave him a real
Yep.
werewolf with the Jack Pierce makeup. Jack Pierce's makeup really brought it to life, and very, very, very well crafted, very suspenseful, very scary film, and the emphasis is Wolf Man. It is about Larry Talbot. It's not just a monster on the loose. It's about this young man who is tortured by guilt because he left home. His brother has died in a hunting accident, or I believe a hunting accident, if I remember correctly. And he's estranged with his father. They're trying to rebuild a relationship, and he's a playboy, and he's chasing a
Yep.
girl who's engaged to somebody else, and that wanderlust playboy attitude gets him bitten by a werewolf, and now he's really got a problem with his father because his father thinks his son is a nut, and it is a human-driven horror movie. It is a character-driven horror movie, and it really holds up very well today.
Yep.
Some of the other Universal movies, they're a little clunky, like the Mummy sequels and all that. But the Wolfman, ooh, yeah, that really holds up very well today.
And
Wolfman
and
and
the
Bride of Frankenstein.
and the funniest thing about it, to anyone that hasn't seen it, Bela Lugosi is the fortune teller that is the first Wolfman he's a werewolf in the film, but he
Mm-hmm.
bites Larry Talbot, and that's how Larry Talbot becomes
Yep.
the Wolfman. And Lon
Yeah.
Chaney Jr., great actor, another great one.
Oh, yeah, he was great.
Um,
Didn't
God,
like being called Junior. He really did
no,
not like that. He would get very mad if you called him Junior. Um, it's funny because did not have the best relationship with his father.
no.
Lon Chaney Sr. was, did not have the reputation of being the nicest man in the world.
Well, he was
Remember.
the original. He was the man of 1,000 faces, right? Or was that Junior?
No, it's Senior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the Phantom of the Opera too, I do believe.
Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and he was the fake vampire in London After Midnight. And he was I can't remember, what was the name of the movie? The Man Who Laughed. That's the Joker. That character that he plays in that movie became the Joker.
Really?
I don't want to say they completely, it's not the same character, but
no, but it was probably the look.
Heavily influenced the Joker, heavily influenced, or so they say. It's speculative. But when I look at them, I say, I can see the resemblance. So,
God.
Either way.
Number one with the Wolfman from Tony. God, number one from me. Everyone's going to know what I'm going to say, but number one could go anywhere. I mean, I was a fan of the British horror movies, the Hammer movies, when they tried to remake all those movies. I I love the original Universal movies as
Mm-hmm.
well. The Mummy, yeah, I can agree with you on that one. It wasn't Boris Karloff's greatest role. I think Frankenstein, when he played the monster in Frankenstein, was probably the best.
Mm.
Um, but number one, I gotta go Halloween. I mean, it was the first movie I ever watched that scared the crap out of me, and
It was creepy. It was creepy, and I remember the character Michael Myers, aka the Shape, very creepy and very
yeah,
real. It was a,
yeah,
it was a, it was a disturbed psychopath in a Halloween mask, blending in with trick or treaters. And in the original, before they turned him into whatever, I don't know, super monster in Halloween 2,
superhuman.
yeah, they didn't know what the hell they were. They're throwing
Yeah.
everything at the wall. They didn't know what the hell to do in the sequel.
Well, Carpenter didn't want to do a second one, and in reality, did it really need it?
No, no.
I mean, you could have had Halloween be a one-off and then waited until they did 2018, or you could have waited until the 90s to do another one. I mean,
Ah,
but Halloween has the distinction, supposedly, of being the first movie to have a sequel.
oh, which one? The first? You mean the first what?
Halloween,
Yeah, Halloween.
supposedly.
Universal wanted money,
Yep.
and they were not going to let a cash cow like that die.
No.
And I think Carpenter, I don't know what him and Deborah Hill were thinking. I can't speak for them, but I think that when a major studio comes to you and wants a movie, you probably wouldn't want to turn them down because, oh boy, I don't think you have the
Well,
best. That would not be the best career decision, I
yeah.
think. So doing the sequel and then moving on to something else, probably was probably more of a business decision more than a creative one.
John Carpenter actually almost got sued because originally The Fog was supposed to be under Irwin Yablans'
Hmm.
production company, but Carpenter took it somewhere else. Well, Yablans was going to sue not only Carpenter, but the production company that would later release The Fog, unless Carpenter came back to do Halloween 2. And Carpenter, by all merits, says he hated doing it. He didn't feel that he could do a sequel that would do justice. And we got the lamest reasoning for Michael being going after Laurie. You could have literally wrote it as she was the only one to escape that night. Would have made it better sounding. And then plus after Michael gets killed in the second one, you wouldn't have had to probably have the thing that and Halloween 3 is a great movie on
Oh
its
yeah.
own. If they would have
Hmm.
just said Season of the Witch, a Halloween film, I think it would have done better. But because they added Halloween 3 and how much they put into the character of Michael Myers Loomis,
Hmm.
it was doomed to fail from the beginning, but it's still great. I mean, it still is. And say what
Halloween
you,
three made Halloween three made money. It
yeah,
just did not. It
people
made
were
money.
wondering where Michael was.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a big budget movie. It did a
Yep.
decent at the box office. It made a profit, but it was not. It was there was disappointment, and they decided not to continue it as the original plan, a horror
Yep.
anthology of Halloween horror
Yep.
movies. And
Yeah.
then you got, eventually you got more Michael Myers, but that was like up and down. Yeah, good movies and really lousy ones. Now
I mean,
Halloween was better. Supposedly, don't know how true it is, but I think they said that it was influenced by Dario Argento, some of his movies. I don't know
well,
how
not only
true.
that, but Psycho. Psycho was a
Yeah.
very heavily influence, and without Assault on Precinct 13, we might not have gotten Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis. We probably would have had Christopher Lee if Irwin Yablans didn't kind of say, no, John, let's go with someone else. Because Irwin
Yeah.
Yablans was afraid that casting Christopher Lee, which Christopher Lee turned it down anyway, but they felt that if they casted him as Loomis, it would have been another Hammer film. And
Yeah, they
who
would have
knows?
overshadowed it.
Yep. Who knows? And plus Christopher Lee was taller than um God,
Five, but yeah, he would have towered over everybody.
yeah, he would have towered over Michael, and I to be
But
honest with you,
they got Dick Warlock for the sequel, and
yep.
then he's short for the role. He's much shorter than the first actor, and this doesn't work. If you want to see Donald Pleasance in a really great performance, get the movie Wake and Fright, which is one of the best movies ever to come out of Australia. That's a really cool psychological thriller.
I also liked him in um The Great Escape, and later another great one that he did with John Carpenter, which was Escape from New York.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah,
then I
yeah,
think he also did The Prince of Darkness too. I think that was another Carpenter
yes,
Pleasance
yes,
one. Yeah.
yes, yes. That was when they tried to resurrect Carpenter's career with these low budget movies.
Yep.
And Prince of Darkness did well at the box office. Just the other stuff just didn't. The other movies
No.
in that whatever picture deal they had just didn't do that well.
Yep.
But again, it was the '80s, and horror just had that 5 or 6 or 7 year or whatever year drive.
The Thing is such, I don't know how it got the hate that it did, but The Thing was another great Carpenter movie that the critics just shit on. And that would later turn Carpenter away from doing high budget movies to going back in the 90s to doing low budget, because he said it was too much to have that much of a budget when most of his low budget films were better.
Yeah, The Thing just played three nights
Yeah.
in the New Beverly Theater. I couldn't get a ticket. It sold out all 3 nights. This is maybe about 6 7 months ago, and The Thing was actually re-released on a bunch of screens, and
Yep.
it did really well. This year or last year. The Thing, man, it just came out at the wrong time. I mean, two movies that came out that same summer that didn't do well was The Thing and Blade Runner.
Yep.
And a lot of it, some people say that it's just E.T., even though they're certainly not chasing the same audience,
Yep.
just ate up a lot of ticket sales and overshadowed everything. Again, I don't know how true that is. I don't know why The Thing didn't do well at the box office. Maybe I think because we were still in the throes of slasher, 82,
Well,
81, 82.
I think you can even go back to They Live being Carpenter's kind of great film, but I think that leads to kind of his trajectory because in the 80s he had some great movies. They Live,
Oh yeah,
Thing, Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell, which was a horror comedy.
he had a lot of great movies. They just didn't make any money. I mean, well, They Live, that did pretty good.
Escape did really well.
Yeah, it did, and I believe The Fog was a big hit. The problem was with Avco Embassy. Avco Embassy, the company behind all this, went bankrupt.
Yeah.
But he did Starman, great film. I don't think it did well.
No.
Big Trouble in Little China, fun movie, didn't do well. And when you start putting one movie after another that's not doing that well, like Christine, I thought Christine's a great film.
Christine, great movie.
But it's a break even at best, I mean, again, it's just 1983 horror. It got choppy. It got choppy in the 80s. And I blame too many slasher movies, too many sequels, and too many horror comedies. And after a while, people got sick of them.
Well,
and VHS, competition from VHS.
Yeah. I mean, even with that, going harkening back to Halloween, he originally showed it to people without music, and they laughed about it. They literally laughed. And some lady, I don't know if she was like a secretary or something of some production, maybe the production company that was helping get Halloween out there. She said it's not scary. I don't know how you want us to market this movie. She pretty much told him it was shit. And
Yeah.
so he comes back, does the music, comes back, and she literally came up to him and said, play those movies back to back, and it's a whole different movie.
Wow.
And she's like, it scared the crap out of us. But yet, when that movie went into theaters, did not do very well. Its first week or second, first and second weeks, I think, were not good until a critic came out and said, this is the scariest movie I've ever seen. And then it came in droves because it was
Yeah.
in danger of being just a throwaway film at first.
Yeah, you gotta remember in those days, they not every movie opened wide. A
Yep.
lot of times movies open
Limited release.
100, 200 screens because
Yep.
they're low budget movies. And what would happen was you got to pay for all those prints. Like
Yeah.
when you do a movie,
Yep.
they're not gonna they were not gonna Jaws, the most screens Jaws played on at the 750. That was like the biggest box office hit of all time
Yep.
up to that point. And in the entire United States at the height, it only had 750 screens. So a horror movie, they might open it on 100, 200
Yeah.
screens with a rental figure to bring in a decent chunk of money. And if the movie did well, they would hold it over for another week,
Yep.
and they like more prints. And then they say, well, we're drawing really good money here. We're going to raise the rental figure. Look, it's
See how
doing
much
really
more we
well.
can milk it for.
And once it's doing money, it's not going to get hard to get future bookings. So the
Yep.
movie, it might take 6 months for this movie to play across the U.S. at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So although Halloween, obviously they would want it in the fall, but
Yep.
it was not like a wide release. I think
No.
Billy Jack,
Yep.
Trial of Billy Jack, I think was the first one that was really a really wide release.
Well, and getting back onto that, which I talked about Billy Jack on my podcast before. The first movie was such a different atmosphere that by the time Billy Jack came out, again, didn't know how to market it. So Tom Laughlin buys it back and
Mm-hmm.
puts it back in theaters, and it at that time was one of the highest grossing independent films at its time.
Yeah, and he
And
had the four wall. He had the four
yep,
wall theaters, which means he had to rent the theater
yep.
to prove that it could sell. And it sold and it sold and it sold. And it became a big hit.
Them were
Billy,
underrated movies.
yeah,
But
Billy
then of
Jack
course,
was in Washington. I got a story about that. I could have purchased a 35 millimeter print for about $100.
really.
This was this is back before it got released on video, and I didn't have $100. And what was I going to do? I have a 35 millimeter projector. What am I going to do with it? Where am I going to store it? You know, I did
Yeah.
not know the original version was 3 hours, and that's the
Yep.
version that went out in theaters. So, and it only played in 17 theaters. I think it only played in the Midwest. The
They
version that we
literally
got,
go ahead.
the version we got on video is not 3 hours. There's about
No.
45 minutes cut out of it.
Mm-mm.
So I don't know. A
It
lot of loss.
was one of the worst Billy Jack movies, I think, in that series.
Very ill conceived. I don't know
Yeah.
what they were thinking. It was a very ill
Well,
conceived.
and Tom Laughlin, you kind of got to give him credit for the three other ones they made. I mean, The Born Losers, great film. And then to follow it up with Billy Jack, and then you had Billy Jack Goes on Trial, which was pretty much a statement about what was happening on campuses with kids being shot.
Mm-hmm.
It was so taboo back then, but yet Billy Jack and Tom Laughlin, what he did back then was kind of what the political films of today are. It was kind of saying, hey, what's going on behind closed doors is not what we're being told.
Yeah, it was good stuff. He had his finger on the pulse of his
Yep.
audience.
Way ahead of its time.
Problem was he made movies that were not finger
Yeah.
was not on the pulse like the Master
He was
Gunfighter.
he was Billy Jack, and that was it. Once he played Billy Jack and put all his time into that, that's all he was ever known for. And it's sad, but he did so well as that character, and it was new. It was new. You never had that
Yeah,
Native American hero before
he
Billy
wanted he
Jack.
wanted to remake he wanted to remake Boys Town, which would have been really cool, but that didn't happen after
Yeah,
he Master Gunfighter and Billy Jack Goes to Washington kind of
yeah.
sunk his career, which was unfortunate.
Yeah, they were bankrupt for a long time, and then he wanted to make Billy Jack Returns,
He
which
started it.
never got made.
No, he shot about a half hour's worth of footage.
Yeah,
But he had suffered an injury. I think he got his hand cut,
yep,
and they ran out, or he got some kind of injury, and they ran out of money, and they were never able to go back and finish it.
yeah.
In my opinion, nobody was going to buy a ticket to see a Billy Jack movie in 1980. It was not.
It
it
was a
was it
great
was
premise what he wanted to do with it, and that was take on the New York underground pornography scene. But at the
yeah.
same time, like you said, it had run its course. Billy Jack was just like Walking Tall in that realm. Great movies, great stories, but it ran its course. No one
It
wanted to
was
see those
a
independent
creature of
films.
the 70s. No,
Yeah,
he was so it would have required really making the character relevant in the 80s,
yep,
like almost like how Spy Who Loved Me
yep,
revamped James Bond.
yep.
They kept trying to do the 1960s James Bond in the 70s. It didn't work. And then
Yep.
in '77, they come up with it. Okay, you know what? Well, I think we know what we can do here. And then boom. But of course, the Billy Jack movies weren't going to follow that trajectory.
Well, no, and Billy Jack, just like Walking Tall, and we're sorry for getting off topic. We knew it was top five horror, but talking with Tony on some of these movies I absolutely love. Tony, I gotta have you back sometime, man. And
Oh, absolutely.
I would love to talk about the independent film scene because you had Walking Tall, which was based on a
Right.
sheriff, some part of his story, and granted, now you later got the remakes and some of the other shit that they tried to do with it. Um, Supposedly, Bo Svensson is coming back out with another Buford Pusser movie, and
Good.
it's going to be called He Returns.
Wow. Cool. Yeah. It's I'm 20 years older than you, and
Yep.
my experience watching these films was different. And
Yeah.
my experience was different from the people who saw the movie originally. Walking Tall was 1973. I
Mhm.
saw it in the early 80s on TV when it ran on TV. And we would watch, me and my grandfather would watch uh, the 8 p.m. movies on UHF.
Yep.
And, you know, it was a different experience to watch it on television versus watching it in the theater versus watching it as now a classic film
Yeah.
on a special edition release. But that film really was a film that yeah, it really tapped into that Southern drive-in nerve and that
Yep.
audience stuff. The Macon County Line and Gator
Yep.
and
White
White
Lightning.
Light, all great films. Well, Gator's a mess, but I
Yeah.
liked it.
And so, as we said, we hate to say it, but all good things come to end. Willie Nelson said it best one time. He said, "Turn out the lights, the party's over." Tony, thank you so very much for joining me tonight. I
Cool.
appreciate it 100%.
If anybody wants to see what I'm up to, you just go Tony M Caro, Tony TonyMCaro. Put an @ sign before that, and you can find me on TikTok or Instagram. and I have some books out. I have a book on Universal horror movies, but I'm revising it, and that's on Amazon. But wait for the paperback. I'm going to be coming out in Halloween. And I have a horror anthology coming out in 2 months called Tragedy Man, which is influenced and an homage to horror comics and the old Amicus anthology movies.
Okay.
And I've gotten some. It was serialized. It's not. It's already been out in serialized form, and people really enjoy it.
Yep.
And the collected edition novel will be out in a couple months. And if you follow me on social media, I'll give you updates on that. And my prices are affordable. I don't charge $29 for a book.
And go check out his Instagram at Tony M. Cairo on Instagram and TikTok, you said?
Yep.
Great guy, great guest. Thank you so very much. Your knowledge of
Wow.
films rivals my own, so we will definitely try and get you back on here for an independent film scene.
Yeah. I forgot to mention, I also write for horrornews.net, and I got about 23 essays on there. And I actually have one Halloween 3, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Howling, Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. I have Black Christmas. I have Tombs of the Blind Dead. I have Night Stalker. I got a bunch of essays on there, and those are all free at horrornews.net, and that's a great website that is
Mhm.
a lot of good current news on new releases and independent horror movies.
Well, Tony, thank you so very much again, man. I appreciate it 100%. Um, I can't say that enough that you wanted to come on this show, and I thank you, and hopefully I get to have you back on soon. Um, it was great. Thank you so
Okay,
very
no,
much.
I appreciate it. I appreciate
I
the opportunity. I had a lot of fun.
I hate that we had to do 5, but with our next one, we'll whenever you do come back on, we'll do a top 10 for independence
Oh yeah, wow, yeah. We can
because
do by the decade.
I feel like you have to.
Yeah, there's just too many of them.
So I will talk to you some other time, bro. Thank
Thank
you
you. I
so very
appreciate
much.
it. All righty. Bye
Bye.
bye.
And that was Tony Caro. Loved having him on the show. If you're new to the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe as it does help out the channel. Also, go check out Talking Shit with Brian Alam and with Mark Bensett Jr. And I will see you all next time.